Donald Trump bashes illegals, then, well, this violence happens, and Trump gets the blame. Bernie Sanders, he bashes capitalism, then this violence breaks out at an anti-capitalist protest. And Kathy Lynn Taylor wants to know why Sanders gets none of the blame. We're also joined by Sanders supporter Harlan Hill and Morgan Ortegas, of national co-chair of Maverick PAC. Kathy, explain the difference. Is it just the mainstream media interpreting things one way or the other, or is it something more complicated than that?
Well, it's not complicated at all. Look, it's fundamentally anti-American to be anti-capitalist. And for Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton to be blaming Trump or anybody else when they are absolutely funded themselves by taxpayer dollars. Bernie Sanders certainly couldn't become senator without capitalist funding, nor could Hillary Clinton. It's just not only dishonest, but it's really predatory. And it's unfair to American voters for them to be saying one thing and then absolutely doing another.
Right. But here's the thing, though, Harlan. The interpretation is that Donald Trump's words in the past have sort of instigated this scenes, the ugly, violent scenes we saw last week. And yet you never get that sort of label affixed to Bernie Sanders, whether it's at the things that happened in Seattle over the weekend or some of the, Trump events where Bernie Sanders supporters have obviously been there.
Certainly. I mean, I really think it's unfair to level a charge against Donald Trump's campaign for the violence that's occurred in and around his rallies. He's had nothing to do with it. I don't think that he's to blame at all. Equally, I don't think that it's responsible or fair to blame Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders for these riots in Seattle. I think that really what's at the heart of this is a paradox in capitalism that's starting to form where, there's an extreme divide between people that have and have not. And that's really to blame for protests like this one. What I issue with is actually Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton's rhetoric when it comes to police officers. You had 5 police officers hurt last night, and I think that's the problem.
Harlan, that divide that you're talking about is manifested by liberal media. I mean, we have 5 states right now, New York, California, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Maryland, where 1% of taxpayers pay 1/3 of the taxes. Any one of those people move, and everybody in this whole state's taxes will go up and services will be cut. We shouldn't be attacking those people for making money. We should be sending them thank you notes.
Let me bring in Morgan, because I want to kind of focus, though, on the idea that we see violence. And one, there's always a distinct finger pointing done by the media. And the other, like the anti-capitalist violence that we saw over the weekend, we don't hear anything, despite the fact, to Harlan's point, one of the central issues of this campaign has been about the haves and have-nots and how to fix that. Morgan, should politicians take some of the responsibility?
Well, Charles, let me say, first of all, I think that there is a clear pattern of leftist protests that turn violent. You can look at the May Day protests. These happen every year. And unfortunately for the Seattle Police Department, instead of worrying about policing their communities and keeping them safe, they have to deal with grown people biting police officers, throwing Molotov cocktails when they should be worried about what's going on in their communities. This happens every year. If you look at the Wall Street protests against the quote-unquote 1%, liberal rallies tend to turn very ugly and tend to turn very violent. I mean, look at all of the protests that we saw over the Black Lives Matter movement. I mean, I don't know why it's underreported that these leftist protests are consistently violent and not peaceful. Look at the Tea Party in contrast. When they were protesting, they got covered nonstop by the mainstream media, and were there disgusting things that may have been said or happened in some of the Tea Party protests? Absolutely. But did you see mass rioting, looting? Did you see people biting cops? Didn't happen at any of the Tea Party.
Yeah, we saw peaceful protests and people cleaning up after themselves. But Harlan, we do know that passion, particularly this election cycle, has been extremely high, and that there is a powder keg situation. There is a powder keg. People are angry, frustrated, and they feel like this is it. Yeah. This is the one time maybe the last time in my lifetime, I'm going to get a real shot, a bite at the apple. At what point do we hold politicians responsible for saying, hey, I'm going to fix things, but be cool, don't explode?
Well, I think that politicians on both sides of the aisle need to say that. We're looking at potentially a contested convention on the Democratic side and potentially one on the Republican side. And in the event that that happens, if we start to see that party elders and the establishment really work against the will of the people and they utilize stop-guard measures that have been in place for a long time but not utilized to overrule the will of the people, a plurality of voters and a plurality of delegates, we've got a really volatile situation on our hands.
Yeah. Kathy, do you think this is going to happen, or do you think things get worse between now and November?
Well, I think that people are starting to realize that unity is a good thing. We're always going to have these protests, and that's okay. Freedom of speech is okay. What's not okay is what you alluded to, Charles, where you're taking somebody's words or tone, and just because you disagree with it, use that as a rationale to be dangerous or violent or cost taxpayers money. Those things are not okay. I hope very much that both parties can understand that voters are looking for change, and that change can be positive, and we need to unify on both sides of the aisle and even across it to make some real differences. And I hope it happens. I got to
tell you, though, I can smell it in the air. It's like what was that movie, Napalm in the Air, whatever? You can kind of feel it in the air, guys.
That's
Unfortunately, I think it's going to be a crazy summer. Thanks a lot. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Charles.
All right,
Thanks, Charles.